The rain fell without mercy that night, washing away the noise of the city and painting every light with sorrow. Maya walked home from her shift at the hospital, her white shoes stained with the color of exhaustion. She had spent another night surrounded by cries, needles, and fading heartbeats, the kind of silence that lives only in hospitals. The world outside looked just as lifeless. Cars whispered by, windows glowed, and life moved on, unaware that within the walls of St. Helena Medical Center, death had taken its share once again. Maya had chosen a quiet life. No ambitions beyond peace, no dreams beyond stability. She rented a small apartment near the river, cared for stray cats, and sent money to her younger sister studying abroad. Her life was built on predictability, until the night when a man covered in blood shattered everything she thought she knew about safety. He arrived on a stretcher, surrounded by security men who looked more like soldiers than civilians. His pulse was weak, his body torn by bullets. The hospital staff whispered among themselves, "A private patient, no records, no ID." Maya didn't ask questions. Her job was to heal, not to judge. She only noticed the strange tattoo on his wrist, a small black wolf with crimson eyes. It felt like a warning, though she couldn't tell why. Hours passed. His breathing stabilized, but the tension in the air grew thicker. Two of the men guarding him never left the door. They didn't talk, didn't blink. It was as if they were guarding something sacred, or cursed. When the night nurse went for a break, Maya remained alone with him. His face, though pale, carried the kind of calm only power can grant. He was young, maybe in his early 30s, with scars that told stories of violence. Then the power went out. The lights flickered, the monitors blinked, and the generator failed for a moment that felt like eternity. From the corridor came the sound of boots, fast and many. Maya's instincts screamed. She reached for the emergency light just as the door burst open. Masked men stormed in, guns raised, voices shouting commands she didn't understand. She ducked beneath the bed, heart pounding. Bullets shattered glass, alarms wailed, and in the chaos, one of the guards fell. The wounded man, still half conscious, opened his eyes for the first time. He didn't panic. He simply whispered one word through clenched teeth, "Run." Maya froze. Then she saw the fire spreading in the corridor, and something inside her took control. She grabbed a surgical bag, cut the 4-line, and tried to help him stand. He was heavy, but adrenaline made her strong. Somehow, she dragged him toward the back exit, dodging smoke and falling debris. Outside, sirens screamed in the distance, but the men with masks were already there, searching. Maya didn't know who they were. All she knew was that they were hunting him. And now, by saving him, they were hunting her too. They hid behind an ambulance as gunfire erupted again. Maya could feel his breath against her neck, uneven but alive. He looked at her with the eyes of someone used to commanding armies, not pleading for help. "Please," he murmured, barely audible. "Don't leave me here." She didn't. She couldn't. The rain had turned the streets into rivers of light. Maya found an abandoned car, hotwired it with trembling hands, and drove aimlessly through the storm. The man drifted in and out of consciousness, muttering names: Victor, Kellen, betrayal. She didn't understand, but she could feel danger closing in. Every shadow looked like a weapon. Every sound like death. At dawn, the rain stopped. She pulled over by a deserted pier, her hands shaking. He was still alive, barely. She tore pieces of her uniform to stop the bleeding. His eyes fluttered open once more, and he studied her face, as if memorizing it. "You shouldn't have done this," he whispered. Maya swallowed hard. "I couldn't just watch you die." A faint smile ghosted across his lips before he lost consciousness again. That smile haunted her for hours as she drove him to the only safe place she could think of, her apartment. She had no idea she was bringing the devil home. By noon, his fever broke. She cleaned his wounds, changed his bandages, and watched the rise and fall of his chest with uneasy relief. For a brief moment he looked almost peaceful, just a man, not a threat. But when she opened his coat to clean the last wound, she found a pistol, a black phone, and several folded documents marked with foreign emblems. That's when she realized who he really was. His name was Adrian Volkov, the head of one of the most feared underground networks in Eastern Europe. The man the news called a ghost, the police called untouchable, and his enemies called death. Maya's hands trembled. The logical part of her screamed to leave, to call the authorities, to disappear. But the same strange force that had made her save him kept her rooted in place. She couldn't explain it. Pity, curiosity, or perhaps something deeper, darker. Days passed in restless silence. She locked the doors, covered the windows, and waited for him to wake. Outside, the city went on with its usual chaos. Unaware that one of its most dangerous men lay recovering in a nurse's apartment, she caught glimpses of black cars parked across the street. Maybe it was her imagination. Maybe not. On the fourth night, Adrian woke completely. His voice was rough, but steady. "You should have left me there," he said quietly. "Now you've tied your fate to mine." Maya didn't reply. She was too afraid of what her voice might reveal. That she had already started to care. He tried to stand, failed, and collapsed again. She helped him back to bed. For a moment, their eyes met. In his, she saw something she didn't expect. Not cruelty, but exhaustion. A man who had lived too long in the dark and didn't know how to return to the light. The days that followed blurred together. Adrian recovered faster than she thought possible. He rarely spoke, but when he did, his words carried the weight of command. He asked her name only once. When she said Maya, he repeated it softly, as if testing how it sounded in his world. She caught him staring at her once, through the reflection in the window. "You're not afraid of me," he said. It wasn't a question. Maya turned away. "Maybe I should be." He smiled faintly. "You should." That night, she dreamed of wolves. In the following week, things escalated. The news spoke of violent attacks between criminal groups. Police sirens echoed constantly. Maya knew it was connected to him. One evening, while she was cooking, Adrian stood by the window, his expression unreadable. "They'll find you if they find me," he said. "You need to leave this place." But she didn't. She couldn't leave him half-healed. When he finally walked again, he told her he owed her a debt. One that could never be repaid. She didn't realize it then, but her act of mercy had already rewritten both their destinies. The following night, Maya returned from the pharmacy to find her apartment door slightly open. Inside, two men were waiting. They weren't Adrian's men. They were dressed in black, with cold eyes and silenced weapons. Before she could scream, one grabbed her. Then in an instant, everything exploded. Gunfire, shattered glass, a flash of red. Adrian appeared from the shadows like a ghost. In seconds, the men were down. Maya stood frozen, covered in blood that wasn't hers. Adrian's voice was low, almost gentle. "I told you they'd come." Before she could process what had happened, he took her by the hand and led her outside. A black SUV waited. She wanted to ask where they were going, but he didn't answer. The night swallowed them again, and the city behind them faded into silence. Maya looked out the window as they drove through endless roads surrounded by forests and fog. She realized that her life, the one built on safety, routine, and small dreams, had ended the moment she chose to save him. And deep down, though she refused to admit it, she didn't regret it. Because for the first time in years, her heart was alive. Beating not from fear, but from something dangerously close to destiny. The drive felt endless, swallowed by the sound of rain and the rhythmic hum of tires against a lonely road. Maya sat in silence, her fingers clenched tightly on her lap. She didn't know where they were going, nor did she dare to ask. Adrian sat beside her, his face half lit by the glow of passing headlights, calm, expressionless, yet filled with the kind of focus that came only from a man who trusted no one. After hours of silence, the car finally turned down a narrow dirt road surrounded by thick forest. The air grew colder, and fog began to roll across the headlights like whispers. When the trees parted, Maya saw it. A vast mansion hidden deep within the woods, surrounded by stone walls and guarded gates. It looked like something forgotten by time, a monument built to keep the world out. The gates opened without a word. Men in black coats nodded as they drove through. Maya caught the glint of weapons beneath their jackets. Her heartbeat quickened, but Adrian remained still, as if he had returned to the only place that could contain his chaos. Inside, the mansion was silent. Too silent. The air smelled faintly of smoke and cedar, and the lights were dim, casting long shadows across marble floors. Maya was led to a guest room overlooking the forest. The view was breathtaking. Endless trees, pale mist, no sign of civilization. She realized how far she was from everything she knew. When the door closed behind her, the silence felt suffocating. She looked around. Elegant furniture, thick curtains, and a single framed painting of a white wolf standing on a cliff. She didn't need to ask what it symbolized. Days passed in a blur. She was given food, clean clothes, even books, but no answers. The mansion had servants, yet no one spoke to her. Adrian appeared only occasionally, moving like a shadow through hallways, speaking in low tones with men she didn't recognize. They all bowed slightly when he passed. At night, Maya lay awake, listening to the faint echo of footsteps and the distant hum of engines. Sometimes she thought she heard whispers outside her door. Once, she found a mark on her window, a single fingerprint on the glass, though she hadn't touched it. Fear became her constant companion, but so did curiosity. One morning, she found Adrian in the garden, sitting beside a pond surrounded by dying roses. He looked different in daylight, less like a criminal, more like a man haunted by his own reflection. Maya approached quietly, unsure if she should speak. He noticed her without turning. "You're wondering why you're still here," he said softly. She nodded, though he couldn't see it. "Because if you leave now, they'll find you," he continued. "And they won't be as merciful as I was." Maya's throat tightened. "So I'm your prisoner." He finally turned his gaze toward her, calm but cold. "You're my responsibility." It wasn't an answer, but it was the only truth she was allowed. From that day on, Adrian allowed her more freedom, to walk the gardens, to read in the library, to eat with him at the same table though neither spoke much. She began to notice small things about him. The way his hands trembled when he poured his drink, the scars along his forearm, the tiredness that lingered in his eyes even when he smiled. He was not the monster the world described. But he wasn't innocent either. Maya found herself trying to understand him, though she knew she shouldn't. It was dangerous, this slow unraveling of her fear. One evening, as the sun sank behind the forest, Adrian stood by the window, watching the horizon. "When I was your age," he said quietly, "I thought I could escape this life. I was wrong. There's always someone waiting to pull you back." His voice carried a weight she couldn't ignore. He didn't look at her, but she could feel the loneliness in his words, the kind that no power could erase. That night, Maya dreamed again, this time of glass walls. On one side stood Adrian, untouchable. On the other, herself, reaching out but never crossing through. When she woke, her pillow was wet with tears she didn't remember crying. Weeks passed. Maya grew used to the rhythm of the mansion. The morning silence, the distant conversations in foreign tongues, the constant tension that hung in the air. She began to write letters to herself, never sending them, just to feel human again. In those letters, she tried to explain what she couldn't say aloud, that her fear had become something softer, something dangerous. Then one afternoon, while cleaning a shelf in the library, She found a small notebook hidden behind old books. Its pages were filled with names, dates, and codes. But among them one word stood out: Maya. Her hands trembled. There were entries about her hospital shifts, her apartment, even her sister's name. The notes began months before the night she met Adrian. The truth struck her like cold water. She wasn't a random nurse who saved a stranger. She was watched, chosen, maybe even used. When Adrian entered the room minutes later, she was still holding the notebook. His expression didn't change when he saw it. He simply said, "You weren't supposed to find that." Maya felt her voice break. "You followed me? All this time?" He didn't deny it. "I needed someone I could trust. And trust can't be bought, it has to be found." Her anger burned through the fear. "You manipulated me." "I protected you," he said quietly. "Long before you ever saw me bleeding in that hospital." Maya stared at him, searching for a lie, but his eyes held nothing but exhaustion. "Protected me from what?" "From the people who killed everyone else I cared about." The silence that followed was unbearable. She wanted to scream, to cry, to escape, but all she could do was whisper, "You should have left me out of it." Adrian looked away. "I couldn't." For days after that, Maya avoided him. The mansion felt colder. The servants stopped making eye contact. She considered running, but deep down she knew he was right. She had nowhere to go. Whoever was after him would be after her too. One night, as thunder rolled across the forest, Maya stood on the balcony, staring into the dark. She wondered if trust was just another word for surrender. She didn't hear Adrian approach until he was beside her. "You hate me now," he said softly. Maya didn't answer. The rain began to fall again, light and slow. He continued, "You think I ruined your life. Maybe I did. But if I hadn't brought you here, you'd be dead." She looked at him then, really looked, at the lines around his eyes, the quiet guilt in his voice. "And what about you?" she asked. "Who protects you?" He gave a faint, hollow smile. "No one." The next morning, Maya found the mansion unusually quiet. Half the guards were gone. The phone lines were cut. Something had changed overnight. Adrian appeared at breakfast, his expression hard. "They found us," he said. "You need to stay inside. No windows, no lights." Maya's heart pounded. "Who?" He didn't answer. He only glanced toward the forest. "Victor's men." She didn't know who Victor was, but she saw the fear in Adrian's eyes, not for himself, but for her. For the first time, she realized that even monsters can be hunted. As night fell, gunfire echoed in the distance. The mansion lights were dimmed. Adrian moved through the halls with quiet urgency, giving orders, preparing for something inevitable. Maya sat in her room, clutching the pendant he had given her for protection. A small silver wolf, cold against her skin. When the shooting finally stopped, silence returned, heavier than before. She stepped into the corridor, her bare feet touching the cold floor. Smoke lingered faintly in the air. Downstairs, she found Adrian standing alone among shattered glass and broken furniture. The look in his eyes was not victory, it was fatigue. "They'll keep coming," he said quietly, "until one of us stops breathing." Maya wanted to say something, anything, but no words came. He turned toward her, and in that moment, the distance between them felt infinite. "Go to your room, Maya," he said gently. "Tomorrow I'll tell you everything." She nodded, though she knew that tomorrow might never come. As she lay awake that night, the moonlight spilled across the floor like broken glass. Somewhere in the distance, an owl cried, lonely and low. Maya realized that she had crossed a line she could never return from. Whatever was happening around her was no longer just Adrian's world. It was hers now too. Morning arrived not with light, but with silence. A silence so deep that it felt unnatural. The kind that only follows violence. Maya woke to the faint smell of smoke. her heartbeat echoing in the still air. Outside her window, the forest was wrapped in fog, hiding what had happened during the night. She wanted to believe it was over, but in her heart she knew nothing was ever truly over in Adrian's world. When she stepped into the hall, she saw men moving quietly, cleaning the traces of chaos. Bullet holes patched, blood wiped away, broken glass swept under rugs, as if pretending could erase reality. Adrian was nowhere to be seen. Hours passed before he appeared. His shirt was torn, hands bruised, eyes shadowed with exhaustion. He didn't greet her. He just poured himself a glass of water and said, "It's done." Maya wanted to ask what done meant, but something in his voice told her not to. She sat opposite him, studying his face. It wasn't the face of a man who had won. It was the face of someone who had survived at too high a cost. He finally looked up. "You should call your sister," he said quietly. "Tell her you're safe." Her chest tightened. "You found her?" Adrian nodded. "She's fine. She doesn't know where you are and she won't. It's better that way." It should have been comforting, but instead, it made Maya realize how completely her life had slipped out of her own hands. Even her family was now part of a system she couldn't see or control. That evening, she went walking through the garden. The roses that once bloomed had turned black at the edges, heavy with rain and neglect. The mansion loomed behind her like a fortress, protective and suffocating all at once. She wondered how much of herself she had lost since the night she chose to save Adrian Volkov. Inside, the servants whispered that another war was coming. Victor, the rival leader, had lost men but not his pride. He was gathering allies. The next attack, they said, would not be in the shadows. It would be open, brutal, final. Maya listened from the corridor one night as two guards spoke in hushed voices. "He's risking everything for that woman," one said. "She doesn't even know what he's done to keep her alive." Her heart stung with confusion. What had Adrian done? And how many lives had he taken for her sake? Later, she found him alone in the study, staring at a map spread across the table. Red lines, marked locations, photos, names, all the anatomy of war. "Does it ever stop?" she asked softly from the doorway. Adrian didn't turn. "No. It just changes faces." "Then why fight at all?" He lifted his gaze to her finally. "Because if I stop, they win." His tone was calm, but beneath it, she could hear something else, despair. In that moment, she realized he wasn't fighting for power. He was fighting to hold on to what little humanity he still had left. Days turned into weeks. Maya began to move through the mansion with quiet acceptance. She helped the cook, tended to the wounded after skirmishes, even bandaged Adrian's arm once more. He never asked for help, but he never refused it either. There was a wordless rhythm between them, a fragile truce between captor and savior. But the peace shattered one afternoon when a familiar voice echoed through the hall. "Maya." She froze. It was Alara, her friend from the hospital. The one who had called her countless times after she disappeared. The one Maya thought she'd never see again. Alara stood in the foyer, flanked by two of Adrian's men. She looked terrified but relieved. "Thank God you're alive," she cried. "They said you were dead, Maya. I've been searching for you for months." Maya's eyes filled with tears as she ran to hug her, but Adrian's voice cut through the air before she reached her. "Enough." He stepped into the room, his presence heavy, commanding. "She shouldn't be here," he said. Alara turned to him, trembling. "You're the one who took her, aren't you?" Adrian didn't answer. Maya looked between them, confused. "How did you find this place?" she asked. Alara's eyes darted nervously. I was contacted. Someone told me where you were, said you needed help." Adrian's jaw tightened. "Who contacted you?" Alara hesitated, then whispered, "A man named Victor." The name hit like a knife. Adrian moved closer, his tone like ice. You brought him to my door. Maya's breath caught. No, Alara wouldn't. But outside, engines roared. The ground trembled. Floodlights lit the forest. Victor's men had come. Chaos erupted. Adrian shouted orders. Guards ran to their positions. Maya grabbed Alara's hand and pulled her toward the back hallway, her pulse racing. We have to hide, she whispered. Gunfire cracked the night open. Windows shattered. The mansion that had been their prison turned into a battlefield. They hid in the cellar, the air thick with dust and fear. Alara clung to Maya's arm. I didn't know, she cried. I thought I was saving you. Maya wanted to believe her, but a small, dark part of her wondered if trust was ever more than an illusion. Above them, explosions echoed. The ground shook. Somewhere, a door slammed open, followed by the sound of a struggle. Then silence. Minutes passed. Then footsteps approached. Adrian appeared at the top of the stairs, covered in soot, eyes burning with fury and pain. We have to leave, he said. Outside, smoke filled the air. The mansion burned. Victor's men were retreating, but Adrian's forces were decimated. He led them to a black car waiting near the woods. Maya looked back once. The flames consuming everything that had held her captive and safe at once. They drove for hours without speaking. Alara sat in the back, silent, tears streaking her face. When they finally stopped, they were in an abandoned industrial complex, cold and silent. Adrian stood by the car, his hands trembling. She was used, he said, staring at Alara. Victor fed her lies, knowing she'd lead him here. Maya turned to her friend. Is it true? Alara shook her head, sobbing. I didn't know. Maya, please. But Adrian's men had already surrounded her. Let her go, Maya said, stepping forward. Adrian's expression was unreadable. If I do, she'll be hunted. Or she'll come back with more of them. Then I'll go with her. His eyes flashed, a rare break in his composure. You can't. Why? Maya demanded. Because you don't trust me either? Adrian's voice was quiet, but every word was heavy. Because you're the only thing left in my life that isn't a weapon. The silence that followed was unbearable. Alara cried softly, her face buried in her hands. Adrian turned away, as if the sight of either woman hurt too much to bear. In the end, he let Alara go. His men drove her to the border, with strict orders to never return. Maya watched the car disappear into the mist, a part of her heart breaking with it. That night, Adrian stood alone outside the factory, smoking in the cold wind. Maya approached quietly. For a long time, neither spoke. Then she said, I don't know what's right anymore. He exhaled slowly, the smoke curling upward. Right and wrong are luxuries for people who still have choices. Maya looked at him. And what do you have? He smiled faintly. A war I didn't start. And you. The admission startled her more than gunfire ever could. In the days that followed, they moved constantly, different safe houses, different faces. Maya became part of his shadowed world, not by choice but by inevitability. She learned to read the silence in his eyes, to anticipate danger before it arrived. Trust became their only currency, fragile, expensive, and easily broken. But the more she understood him, the more she saw the cracks in his armor. Adrian was not invincible. He was a man standing on the edge of his own ruin, trying to build a wall between love and destruction. One evening, they hid in a cabin deep in the mountains. Outside, snow fell quietly, covering the world in white. Inside, a single lamp cast warm light across the room. Adrian sat by the fire, his hands clasped, lost in thought. Maya watched him from across the room. He looked up, meeting her gaze. You should sleep, he said. I can't. Because of me? She hesitated. Because of everything. He nodded slowly. You still don't trust me. Maya swallowed. I don't even trust myself anymore. He stared into the flames. That's how it starts, the doubt. Once it takes root, it grows until you can't tell if you're protecting someone or destroying them. His words lingered in the air like smoke. Outside, the snowstorm intensified, wrapping the cabin in silence. Maya closed her eyes and listened to the fire crackle. For a moment, it almost felt peaceful, like the world had paused just for them. But deep down, both knew peace never lasted. Not for people like them. In the distance, wolves howled. And as the night stretched on, Maya realized that trust wasn't something you gave. It was something you risked, knowing it could break you completely. The city no longer slept. For weeks, the silence that hung over the harbor had been the calm before the storm. But now the streets trembled with the sound of war. The shadows that once hid secrets now burned with gunfire and betrayal. Maya stood by the window of the mansion, her trembling reflection mirrored in the glass. The night outside glowed faintly red, the distant skyline pulsed with fires spreading from the docks. She could smell the smoke even from here. The world she had stumbled into was collapsing, and she knew there was no safe way out. Adrian had not returned since dusk. His men moved through the corridors like ghosts, loading weapons, speaking in hushed voices, their faces grim with quiet acceptance. She heard Luca giving orders in the hall, precise, cold, unshaken, like a soldier who already knew the ending of the story. When she finally found Adrian, he was in the library, the light from the fireplace painting his face in amber and shadow. He looked older, the edges of his control cracking under the weight of the night. Papers were scattered across the desk, maps, coded lists, photos marked with red ink. Maya entered quietly. She didn't speak at first. She just watched him. The man who had once been a nameless patient bleeding in her arms, now standing like a warlord preparing to burn the world. "Is this the only way?" she asked softly, her voice trembling. Adrian didn't look at her. "There's no peace in this life, Maya. Only the illusion of it." He reached for a photo, a younger version of himself with another man, smiling, their arms around each other. Victor. Before the betrayal. Before everything turned to ash. "I built an empire on loyalty," Adrian said, almost to himself. But loyalty doesn't exist. It only lives until someone finds a better price. Maya took a step closer. "And me? What was my price?" He froze. For a long time, the room was silent except for the crackle of burning wood. Finally, he turned, eyes dark but soft, the kind of softness that came only before tragedy. "You were never a transaction," he said. "You were the one thing I didn't plan for." Tears filled her eyes. "You lied to me, Adrian. You had me followed before we even met. You made me believe fate brought us together, but it was all you." "I had to protect you," he whispered. "You were in danger long before you knew my name." "From who?" "From me," he said. The words fell like gunshots. Outside, the thunder of engines echoed through the valley. The war had reached the mansion gates. Luca appeared at the door, blood on his sleeve. "They've breached the perimeter. We need to move now." Adrian nodded, then turned to Maya. "There's a car waiting at the back. Luca will take you." She shook her head. "I'm not leaving." "Maya." "No," she shouted, her voice breaking. "You think you can protect me by throwing yourself into this? By dying for me? That's not love, Adrian. That's punishment." For a moment he almost smiled, a bitter, beautiful smile. "Maybe I deserve it." He placed something in her hand, a small silver key, warm from his touch. "If I don't come back, go to the docks. There's a warehouse with a blue door. Inside you'll find everything, names, accounts, the truth. End it." Maya's fingers closed around the key, trembling. "And you? I'll buy you time." He brushed his thumb across her cheek, as if memorizing the texture of her skin, the only piece of innocence left in his cursed world. Then he turned and walked away. The mansion erupted in chaos. The corridors filled with smoke, the windows shattered with bursts of gunfire. Maya ran after him, screaming his name, but Luca grabbed her by the arm and pulled her through a hidden passage. She fought him, sobbing, but his grip was iron. Outside, the night burned. Through the chaos, she saw Adrian standing in the courtyard, his coat whipping in the wind, bullets raining down around him. He moved like a man already dead, firing back with calm precision, one against many. Maya! Luca shouted, dragging her toward the car. But she couldn't look away. She saw Adrian fall to one knee, clutching his side, then rise again, unstoppable, unyielding. Flames rose behind him as if the world itself was giving him a funeral of fire. When the car engine roared to life, Maya pressed her face to the window, tears blurring the inferno. The mansion was engulfed now, the empire he had built turning into dust and light. She whispered his name once, softly, as if afraid the night would steal it. And in that moment, as the horizon bled red and black, Maya realized that love was never meant to save them. It was meant to destroy them beautifully. Dawn arrived like a confession. The first light of morning crept slowly across the broken city, revealing the ruins left behind by a night of war. The smoke still lingered, curling gently through the streets, carrying the smell of gunpowder and something far heavier, the cost of what could never be undone. Maya stood by the harbor, wrapped in a coat too large for her. The waves slapped against the pier, restless and cold, as if echoing the heartbeat she could no longer feel. Behind her, the city's skyline shimmered with faint embers. Somewhere in those ashes lay everything she had lost. She had not slept. She couldn't. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw him, Adrian, standing in the courtyard, surrounded by fire, refusing to fall. She had watched the flames consume the mansion, watched his world burn with him still inside. Now, all that remained was silence. In her pocket, she still held the small silver key he had given her. It was warm the last time she touched it, now cold as truth. She turned it over in her palm, tracing the tiny scratches on its surface, the final piece of him that had survived the night. The warehouse by the docks was exactly where he said it would be. The blue door, barely visible beneath layers of soot, opened with a sound like a sigh. Inside, she found the truth he had promised: files, ledgers, names. The empire in paper form. All of it built on lies, violence, and fear. But there was something else. A small envelope with her name written in his hand. Inside, a letter. If you are reading this, it means the fire did its job. Don't hate me for what I've done, Maya. You were my only light in a world that deserved none. I used to think strength was measured in control, in power. But I was wrong. Strength is letting go. Don't look for me in the ashes. I was never meant to survive this world. But you were. Her tears fell silently onto the page. For a long time, she stood there, letting the words sink into her bones. Not as forgiveness, but as understanding. By noon, she had taken the documents and delivered them to the authorities. The news spread across the city within hours. The Volkov syndicate dismantled, corruption exposed, arrests made. For the first time in years, the streets began to breathe again. But for Maya, peace didn't come. It never would. She left the city that same evening. No luggage, no destination. Only the sound of the train as it pulled away from the station, carrying her away from the ruins of who she once was. Through the window, she watched the landscape blur. Factories fading into fields, smoke dissolving into mist. In the reflection, she saw herself. Not the nurse, not the captive, not the woman in love with a monster, but something in between. Someone who had seen how fragile the line between good and evil truly was. Night fell again, soft and quiet. She pressed her forehead against the glass, whispering his name into the dark. It wasn't a prayer. It wasn't a plea. It was a memory, a promise carved into the silence. Some loves are not meant to last, she thought. They are meant to change us. When the train crossed the border, she felt something shift inside her. Not peace, but release. The kind that comes when you finally stop running from the truth. Adrian had taught her that trust was the most dangerous weapon of all. One that could destroy or save, depending on whose hands it was in. And in that moment, as the first snow began to fall outside the train window, Maya closed her eyes and let herself remember everything. The pain, the fire, the touch that once felt like home. Because even in loss, love leaves a mark that no flame can erase. The train moved forward into the horizon, vanishing into the white morning, and with it, the last trace of the empire that was built on shadows. And somewhere far behind, beneath the ashes of what once was, the story of Adrian and Maya ended. Not in victory, not in tragedy, but in truth. Because that was always the real price of trust.